Hi, I'm Jennifer Morassutti, Marketing Manager for Crawford & Company Canada, and I am here with a special guest, Scott Bynoe, VP of Marketing North America.
Well, thank you for having me, Jen. This is interesting being on this side of the table, and yeah, I don't know how I feel about it yet, but it's exciting to be on this side.
The tables have turned, it's fun.
Tables have turned, yeah.
So Scott, let's talk about a very important day that's near and dear to my heart, International Women's Day, and tell me, why is supporting women in the workplace important to you?
I think just generally speaking, we should be fostering a culture of inclusion, equity, collaboration. You know, there's been studies that have been done that show that diverse teams, diversity in teams, are higher performing teams, right? They're more creative teams, they're more effective teams. And, you know, it just makes good business sense to do that. So my whole thing is like, why would you not want to support sort of gender diversity, ethnic diversity, diversity of thought on teams? And quite simply put, you know, if your team, let's say your business or your unit or your team isn't reflective of your community, or it's not reflective of your customers, I think you have a problem, right? So I think supporting all kinds of diversity, and specifically what we're talking about today, gender diversity, is super important. It just makes good business sense. And quite frankly, it's the right thing to do.
That's great. That's great. I know that in my career, I've had some wonderful women in leadership, and they've been mentors for me. Do you have a story that maybe you can share with us?
Yeah, I've got probably a few ways I could tackle that question, right? I think from a professional sense and from a personal sense. And so, you know, throughout my career, I've had, actually the majority of my leaders have been women. I've kind of just grown up in my career with female leaders and sort of been on teams. Maybe it's by design or I just got lucky, but I've always been on really diverse teams. And so being part of a diverse team is just something that is natural to me, and it's just sort of known. And I find sometimes if I go into a team, whether it's like I'm joining a meeting or if I've been on a team that wasn't diverse, it's really weird. It feels really, really awkward, right? Like I'll walk into a room and I'll look around and go, it's like the same person in every seat. And it's a little bit awkward for me. And so I think growing up in that and having that expectation just becomes just natural for me. And I think a lot of it was driven by a lot of really strong female leaders that I've had over my career. On the personal side, I think in terms of what inspires me, or sort of women that have inspired me, is I'll talk about my wife. You know, so I've known my wife for a really, really long time. So when we were teenagers, her mom, so my mother-in-law, started a company, or she had started a company 30 plus years ago, in a predominantly male industry. And so for a woman to have a company or to run a company within this particular industry was unheard of. It was just not common. And so to see her grow that and be that leader and successfully grow a company was really, really inspiring. She's now retired and my wife has taken over the company. And you know, seeing my wife now kind of grow the company, I think it's grown 2 or 3 times the size of staff that it was when my mother-in-law started it, has been really inspirational to watch. And I have conversations with her about this all the time too, about creating opportunities for women to really enter this industry, right? So she's been very intentional about the people that she hires, and it is very much mostly women in this company, and she's done that to try and introduce more diversity into the industry, you know, and her way that she can do it through her company, she's doing that, and you know, I find that really inspiring to see that drive in her, and to see that growth, and for her to carry that torch from her mom.
Sorry, I had to take a beat. Sorry, that was like such a nice answer. I was like, lucky wife. Like, that was such I had to like hold, I was like, I hope my husband talks about me like this.
We're gonna cut it all.
No, that was really, really nice. Sorry, I have to take a minute because that was nice. So let's talk about allyship. What role does active allyship play, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I don't think it's enough to simply support a cause if you're not actively advocating for it, right? I think it's somewhat disingenuous if, let's say International Women's Day, if somebody makes a post and hashtags International Women's Day and they post support of it, which is great, you should support it. But if you're not actively advocating the other 364 days of the year, my question would be, what is it that you're actually, like, what are you actually doing, right? And so I'll give an example of let's like use Earth Day as an example. And this might be contentious for some people, but I look at Earth Day, and while it's great, I think it's wonderful, let's be honest, if all you're doing is turning your lights off for an hour, one day for the whole year, what are you really doing, right? And I think you need to have some intention around that. And the past probably decade or so, my wife and I have been really intentional about our diet and what we consume and single-use plastics and being really intentional around those kind of things. And I'm not saying everybody has to do all of that, but I think the idea is you have to have consistent intent throughout the year to do something, right? And if you're trying to make a difference, you have to do something different, right? I think that's weird for some people to think about. It's so obvious, it's right in the word. But if we're trying to make a difference and make a change, you have to change something. And it can't just be this idea of slacktivism and you do it like once per year. I made my posts and I, ticked off the box and I'm gonna go back and do everything else that I was doing before, right? So I think what I would do and what I would say is for anybody watching this, I would challenge leaders that are watching this right now, those that support International Women's Day. After you've done that support, go back to your desk, look at your team. Do you have gender diversity on your team? Or is your team, and this is me obviously speaking from a male perspective, or is it like looking in the mirror? Have you just hired a bunch of versions of yourself? Do you actually have diversity on your team? And it's incumbent on you as a leader to ensure that you do have diversity. Now, maybe you inherited a team and that's how it is, or you've kind of grown this team over the years. But the point being is you need to be the one that actually steps up and makes that change. Because if not you, then who? And not to say, fire everybody and change your whole team overnight. It's not like it's going to change overnight. We know that there's time and there's a journey, but it's incumbent on you to do that, right? To start to think to yourself, and going back to one of my first answers was, does your team reflect your community? Does your team reflect the customers that you serve? And so when I think of allyship, it's constantly looking and making sure that there is equity on both sides, right? For both men and women, for gender diversity, like I talked about, diversity of thought. It's really important that we pay attention to those things, because I think it's not good enough, and I'll die on this hill. It's not good enough to make a post one day a year to say I support something. You actually have to do something about it. So my question would be, what are we doing about it?
Right. So Scott, how can organizations ensure that this is a year-round commitment?
Yeah, I think it needs to be ongoing and integrated into an organization strategy, right? I think, and it needs to exist at all levels. This isn't just the job of HR. It's not just the job of the executive or the CEO. It's the job of really everybody in the organization, and particularly those that have the accountability or the authority to build teams or to provide growth opportunities, right? And so it needs to exist at all levels. And so another thing too, and I think a lot of organizations have like advocacy groups or like gender inclusion type programs. I think those are great, but they have to be real, right? They have to have real power, and they have to have some real weight behind them that they can actually make a change. I've had some friends, not at Crawford, but in other companies that have told me about they've joined some of these groups at other companies, and it's lip service. They could tell that it was sort of a box ticking thing where, hey, we got to create this group for gender equality, and people go to it and they get there and they quickly realize that it was a bit disingenuous and that it didn't actually have any power. And that really can jade people away from doing it and wanting to do it. And you got to be really careful about that. So if you're going to do it, you really have to give it real power. And I think, and one thing I'll say too as well is that I think and I really actually appreciate you inviting me on to the Crawford Chat to talk about this, because I think what's important is that when we think about International Women's Day or gender inequalities, or specifically about women in the workplace, it's not a woman problem, right? It's a men and women problem. So if you have an organization that is predominantly male-led or male-run, I would argue that is a male problem. We have a problem with the perception or strategically how we are set up to encourage, again, I'll sound like a broken record, ensuring that our organization reflects our community. And so I think it's coming together. It's men and women coming together to solve the problem together. So for that, I really do appreciate you actually asking me on here, because I think it's important to have perspective from everybody about this and how we work together to make sure that we do have equality across our teams in the workplace.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott. This was great. This was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you again. And we can wrap up now.
It's because I talk a lot. It's because I talk too much.
That's not a thing. How can organization... what does supporting women in the workplace look like to you?
What is that? Go ahead, make it harder on me, Jenn.
Okay, so Scott.
Wait, let me stop laughing first.
Okay, hold on, I gotta think about how I'm gonna... Hi, I'm Jennifer Morassutti, Marketing Manager, Canada. I am here with a special guest. Okay.
Not so easy, is it, Jenn?
No, it's not.
See, I'm gonna be the worst guest. he's like, everybody else is so smooth, and like you're just like cutting everything.
Because you know the back
I'm
end.
overthinking it,
Well, you know how this works.
Yeah.
How do you normally introduce it? Like, hi, I'm Scott. Bynoe, welcome to...
Hey, what's up, party people?
No, like, hey,
You're watching Crawford Chat, the place where we chat with people at Crawford, hence the name. Now, where's your microphone, Jenn? See, it's not gonna work.
Oh my gosh! Did it like?
This would have been amazing. See?
I put it.
I told you we're not gonna be able to use any of those. I'll interview myself.
Oh my god! Okay.
You're free.
Okay.
You're free to go. It's just all the all this stuff and the prep and the thing and yeah, it's supposed to look easy. We're making good time.